Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar, me pueden decir Alba, el canal se llama Seriela, estamos aquí para hablar de libros, algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar. You may call me Alba, channel name is Seriela, we're here to talk about books and some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. I am so glad to be taking a break from my break to collaborate with Sarah from Hardcover Hearts at Get to Work Wednesdays, which I'm going to rename for my From video. Books to Action. Yes, because as wonderful as all the books are at creating consciousness about racial equity and systemic racism, closing the book and doing nothing is, not going to cut it, people. We've been doing this for a long, long time. So, getting right down to it, because my phone will die out on me. And it's very hot already in Puerto Rico. I will link Sarah's video down below, of course. And the goal is to answer the question, where do we go from here? I've read the books, a number of books, and fortunately, many of them talk about the fact that this is systemic and there's a lot of hard work to be done. But where to start, right? What do we do? And if you're interested, after I talk about the books and the resources, you can stay for a little story, personal story of my own as far as activism is concerned. If you're What to do first? I would suggest identifying of all those areas in which racial inequity manifests itself. Focus on what interests you the most. And there is a plethora because it's systemic. And racial inequity manifests itself in health, in education, in civil rights and human rights, in the penal, in the justice system, in the work environment, environmental justice, right? For the specific season we're in right now, which is the electoral season, voting. Yes. What interests you? The digital divide, tech, racial inequity in the digital divide, gender, racial inequity in that arena. And yeah, if you can think of any more, let me know down in the comments below. Yeah, so this is about doing the groundwork next. Once I identify what interests me the most, what really calls to me of all those areas, and where, we can see that there is a need for policy change, which is what, gladly, Angela Davis, remember that video I did last year when I read this book? Where she states that if we had mounted a more powerful resistance in the 80s and 90s during the Reagan-Bush era and during the Clinton era, we would not be confronting such a behemoth today. Yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done. Once you identify what it is that you want to work on, the area of your interest, then start small. Start small. You can sign petitions, right? One click, that's easy enough. Donate, and show up. Show up at the organizations that have been formed, because that is another suggestion. Start small and start local with the organizations that already exist. And for that reason is that I brought this book, which has been on my shelves. This is Building Powerful Community Organizations, a personal guide to creating groups that can solve problems and change the world, by Michael Jacoby Brown. This was from 2006. And Michael Jacoby Brown has a video. I will link it down below. Has 30 years experience community organizing, which is not the same as mobilizing people for marches. And I love marches, don't get me wrong. That's where I get everything out. I love to march. I love to protest. I love to picket. But that doesn't really affect policy change, right? That requires long-term commitment, being there and working during the long haul, right? And that's what this book is about. It's about forming those organizations if they have not been formed in your community. And it's a workbook. Very interesting workbook. And he suggests doing the exercises. Yeah. There are organizations out there. And maybe you are fortunate enough to have one of those organizations close by, which would be ideal. Of course, you're going to use your preferred searcher, right, to find out. Just type out racial equity, and you'll find lots, because I did it. Find lots, especially in the United States. And I have to do that here, right? Follow my own advice, which I did. So that was number 2. Start small, start local, look for the organizations. That's number 3. Look for those organizations, community organizations, grassroots organizations that deal with racial inequity, already established and that you trust, right? That have a history of working on those issues. For example, the ACLU, NAACP, and you might be surprised, church organizations. Anybody who's ever been involved in a church knows that churches can organize, right? And if you remember the civil rights era as I do, some of those most organized were the churches. Because, people in the churches know how to organize their people and know how to mobilize their people. Yeah. So, number 1, identify what your interests are. Focus. Number 2, start small, start local. Number 3, find an established organization, a trusted organization with which you can work. This book offers ways of forming a grassroots organization from the beginning. And some of the important things that he mentions in that book is the importance of community, of that one-to-one contact. Really, really important. And that's where my story comes in, my activism, the most recent one, because, I will link the card about my mom and, all of that, in case you missed it. Because, I've been marching for a very long time. But there's a difference. And why I know that books are not going to cut it. because I can read everything in the library that has to do with racial inequity and systemic racism. But if I don't get up and do something, nothing is going to get done. Before I forget, there's a wonderful video interview, like a making of documentary of Stokely Carmichael, in which he makes that distinction very clear, the difference between mobilizing and organizing, because Stokely Carmichael was an organizer and he knew how to do that. I will link that down below also. So what happened to me, really quick? I'm already retired. I'm sitting here, right here at my desk. I'm listening to the radio, because radio is important, people. Radio is very important, especially when you've recovering from a hurricane. I want to send my heart out to the people in Iowa, the devastation, and I hope to find something so that you can link down below and help. Yeah. So I'm listening to the radio. They're interviewing a young woman who is talking about the government's plan to plant gas pipelines, or liquid natural gas pipelines, parallel to one of the main highways in the southern part of Puerto Rico, on Highway number 2. And mentioning the fact that every once in a while, pipelines will explode. And I will link that down below too, because you had one recently over there in the United States in a residential area. Yes. And I was appalled. My heart just stopped. All I could imagine was my family members driving towards me or driving back home on Highway 2 when one of these things exploded. What did I do? First, I confirmed the information, and I went on Highway number 2 and Highway number 1 and saw the pipelines right there in the process of being laid. And then she had left an email. I emailed her. What can I do? I want to help. I volunteered. And she sent me back a PDF of a flyer. And I printed out the flyer, and the prettiest one, along with the black and white ones. I went out on the street, 2 blocks down. The first pretty one in color, in a page protector, I left for the mayor of Juana Diaz. Mayor Juana Diaz was in electoral mode at the time. This was before a local election. And he was, during one of my visits to City Hall, he was handshaking, as they do, right? Handshaking everybody there. I happened to be there. And I asked him about the pipelines, the gas pipelines. And he said, oh, they're installed far away from residential areas, which was not true. Not true at all. One of the pipelines was running right behind a recently constructed development of new houses, right? And all along Highway 2. And Puerto Rico is 100 by 35 miles. You know, anything like that would blow half the island away. So I mentioned it to him. And I left that flyer. Luckily, back to the story, phone cut me off. So let's make the long story short. I started going to their meetings. I started to get to know the people and showed up for whatever it is that I could do. Went to legislative sessions, went to pickets, went to hand out flyers, anything that I could do for the organization, I did. Come to find out that this organization was formed by a community that had been environmentally attacked time and time again throughout the decades. Not only having been displaced for an oil refinery, which has long been dead, the fumes from that refinery, fumes from different incineration projects in the southern part of Puerto Rico. And then later on, after having won the pipeline fight, because that was won, then the coal ash dumping, right? In a dump, an industrial waste site in that same town, Peñuelas. So this is a community that has had experience dealing with environmental justice issues. And that has been a long fight that has many different prongs. The grassroots organization, the mobilizations, the pickets, the marches, but also the legal aspect, right? Taking these people to court, and also the legislative arm of the struggle, which is policy change. Policy change. But it all started at the grassroots level. That is the message that I want to leave here. And that's why this book and the other ones that Sarah mentioned in her video are so helpful. Yeah, because what do we do? What do I do after all the reading? Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And that's all I have to say before my phone cuts me off again. Please feel free to comment down below and offer your own suggestions and your own books. Yeah, so stay safe. Keep on reading, people. Cuídense mucho, mi gente. Los quiero mucho. Adiós.